am Kelly McHugh reporting your news from New News Nightly. Tonight we will be talking about the pressing issues of living wages, drug trade and legalization of marijuana, humanitarian issues in Africa, and the fight for equality for gay rights. Claire Gallagher will now talk to you about living wages.
This is Claire Gallagher reporting tonight to give you the scoop on living wages. Now, before we begin here, I'd like to actually explain to those of you watching what a living wage is. A living wage is a wage which is based upon the cost of living in an area. Under an ideal living wage, someone who works an ordinary 40-hour-per-week job would be able to afford shelter, food, healthcare, and other basic necessities of life. So, to put it in simpler terms, a living wage is a wage that covers the cost of living. The idea is, a full-time worker should not have to be on food stamps or other types of government aid in order to survive. Rising inflation rates cause increases in the cost of living, and although this cost is increasing, the federal minimum wage is not. In fact, the federal minimum wage has been the same since 2009. I can tell you firsthand that the cost of groceries, utilities, and other everyday necessities have absolutely not remained the same. Just take a look at soaring gas prices. If the cost of living is increasing, the minimum wage must do the same. Thus, people around the country are rallying to increase their wages to a wage that is suitable in today's world. As of January 1st, 2014, 21 states' minimum wages have exceeded the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. More and more states are expected to make increases to the state minimum wage within the next few years. Increasing the minimum wage will actually push many families above the federal poverty line. In fact, President Obama has recently voiced his desire and goal to raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour over the next few years and then index it to inflation. Earlier this year, he enacted an executive order which increased the minimum wage for workers under new federal contracts from $7.25 an hour to $10.10. Opponents claim the increase will raise employers' expenses and lead to layoffs. Critics state that businesses will be discouraged from hiring more workers at a time when the government is trying to spur job growth. The state minimum wage in Pennsylvania is currently the same as the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. However, MIT's living wage calculator, which takes into account the living expenses in specific counties, determined the living wage necessary for a single adult to support himself in Lackawanna County is $7.49. Therefore, an individual making minimum wage in our area is currently making 24 cents less than what he or she needs to afford the cost of living. That is just unacceptable in my honest opinion. In fact, 9 out of 22 job areas in the county have wages that are below the living wage for one adult supporting one child. How can we expect people to be able to afford the cost of living when their jobs pay less than what is needed to do so? In order to alleviate the dire need for government aid that people, even those who work full-time jobs, have been forced to seek, minimum wages must be increased. Well, that's about all the time we have for now. I hope you've enjoyed learning about living wages. I'm Claire Gallagher. Good night.
Good evening. I am Kelly McHugh here tonight to talk about the legalization of marijuana and the drug trade in the United States. The ongoing topic of legalization of marijuana has been all the talk for many students and parents lately. Before getting into the hard facts, I wanted to go to one of the typical adolescents for their opinion, which I'd like to cut to now. Here to talk about his opinion on the legalization of marijuana, I have Tom McHugh. Tom, what do you have to say about marijuana being legalized in the United States?
Well, as we know, it already is legalized in some states for medicinal purposes. A number of states and other states are studying to do the same. As far as other uses are concerned, I mean, it's illegal in a lot of states. It's not used appropriately or properly in a lot of states. So there needs to be some type of constraints. There seems to be some kind of regulations involved before I would consider thinking seriously about legalizing it in states for other purposes besides medical marijuana.
How do you think the legalization of marijuana will affect the economy in the United States?
Well, the marijuana sales in the United States, legal or illegally, are in the billions of dollars. One of the pros of legalizing marijuana would be the availability of taxing the sale of marijuana, which would bring a lot of revenue into the different levels of government, whether it's state or national government. Some of the cons of taxing marijuana would be that money, or the lack of taxing, going into the hands of people that aren't part of the government and illegally continuing to market marijuana either in the States or throughout the United States.
This is a very controversial topic, and would you have to pick whether it should be legalized or not legalized?
There's not a yes or no answer to that. It'd be like a, well, yes in this case, no in this case. Yes for the medical purposes and anything that related to medical use for marijuana. No as far as the opponents of legalization of marijuana who tend to label marijuana as a gateway drug. There seems to be a lot of research that needs to be done before they can clarify that continual use of marijuana does not lead to other drug use. And I think at that point you might get a lot of people that are opposed becoming a little bit more supportive of legalizing, to some extent, marijuana, either at the state level or the national level.
Thank you for your time, Tom.
Anytime.
From a parent's perspective, it's understandable as to why they wouldn't want pot to become legalized. But along with many other concerned parents, do they really know all the facts and effects as well as they think they do? I've done some research to get a better understanding of what would happen if marijuana were to be decriminalized. I found that regulating marijuana would bring the nation's largest cash crop under the rule of law, creating jobs and economic opportunities in the official economy instead of the illegal market. Scarce law enforcement resources that could be better used to protect public safety would be preserved while reducing court costs. State and local governments would achieve significant new sources of tax revenue from regulating marijuana sales. The Drug Policy Alliance advocates marijuana legalization through a well-regulated market for marijuana production and distribution. Their purpose is to enact change on the state and federal level through ongoing legislative efforts and through high-profile ballot initiatives in upcoming election cycles. DPA helped lead the historic campaign in 2010 to support Proposition 19 in California. In 2012, Colorado and Washington became the first U.S. states and the first political jurisdictions anywhere in the world to approve measures legalizing and regulating marijuana similar to alcohol. DPA worked closely with local and national allies to draft these initiatives, build coalitions, and raise funds. Similarly, DPA was deeply involved in the campaign to regulate marijuana in Uruguay, collaborating with local civil society organizations. In fact, Uruguay became the first country to legally regulate marijuana in December 2013. One solution to reducing the number of people swept into the criminal justice system for drug law violations is to enact various forms of decriminalization of drug use and possession. Roughly 24 countries and dozens of U.S. cities and states have taken steps toward decriminalization. By decriminalizing possession and investing in treatment and harm reduction services, we can reduce the harm of drug misuse while improving public safety and health. On a less positive note, the illegal drug trade in the United States is one of the most profitable in the world. As such, it attracts the most ruthless, sophisticated, and aggressive drug traffickers. Drug law enforcement agencies face an enormous challenge in protecting the country's borders. More than 90,000 merchant and passenger ships dock at U.S. ports. These ships carry more than 9 million shipping containers and 400 million tons of cargo. Another 157,000 smaller vessels visit our many coastal towns. Included in all these types of trading, drug traffickers conceal cocaine, heroin, marijuana, MDMA, and methamphetamine shipments for distribution in U.S. neighborhoods. So it is still debated whether the pros weigh out the cons or vice versa. 2 states already legalized it, so it could be an enormous change for our country as the states slowly decriminalize marijuana. I'm Kelly McHugh. Good night.
I don't like it personally, but it's time for a conversation about legalizing marijuana. It's a multi-million-dollar industry in Washington state and we get no benefit. What if we regulate it? Have background checks for retailers, stiff penalties for selling to minors. We could tax it to fund schools and healthcare. Free up police to go after violent crime instead. And we would control the money, not the gangs. Let's talk about a new approach, legalizing and regulating marijuana.
Welcome back to New News Nightly. I am Jordan Kane and I will be talking about Darfur and the humanitarian issues surrounding that. Darfur is a region in West Sudan and covers an area of over 190 square miles, roughly the size of Spain. After being independent for hundreds of years, Anglo-Egyptian forces combined Darfur into Sudan in 1916. The region is divided into 5 federal states: Central, East, North, South, and West Darfur. Because of the war between the Sunnis government forces, and the indigenous population in Darfur, the region has been in a state of humanitarian emergency since 2003. It began in February 2003 when the rebel groups Sudan Liberation Movement and Sudan Liberation Army, SLM or SLA, and the Justice Equality Movement, GEM, took up arms against the Sudanese government, which they accused of oppressing Darfur's non-Arab population. The government responded to attacks by carrying out a campaign of ethnic cleansing against Darfur's non-Arabs. This produced the death of tens to hundreds of thousands of civilians and accusing Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in the International Criminal Court for genocide and crimes against humanity. Estimates of casualties range up to several hundred thousand dead from either combat or starvation or disease. Mass displacement and coercion migration forced millions into refuge camps or across the border, creating humanitarian crisis. When the Janjaweed, a Sudanese militia, their goal is to stop rebel groups and to help the Sudan's government enter the genocide, the rape of children, even young boys, often by multiple militiamen and often throughout entire nights, began to report it at a staggering rate. Girls as young as 6 years of age were reported victims while mothers were assaulted in front of their children. Young women were attacked so violently that they were unable to walk following the attack. Non-Arab people, especially women, were reportedly raped by the Janjaweed militiamen as a result of the Sudanese government's goal of eliminating the presence of black Africans and non-Arabs from Darfur, Sudan. 2006 was a breaking point during the war in Darfur. The United Nations approved a resolution to send a new peacekeeping force of over 17,000 troops to the region. Sudan expressed strong opposition to the resolution. The Sudanese government and GEM, the rebel group, signed a ceasefire agreement in February 2010 with a tentative agreement to pursue peace. However, talks were disrupted by accusations that the Sudanese army launched raids and airstrikes against the village, violating the agreement. The GEM, the largest rebel group in Darfur, vowed to boycott negotiations. In 2013, a donors conference in Douala pledged $3.6 billion to rebuild Darfur. The conference was criticized in the region that the Sudanese Liberation Army rebels had taken. According to the groups, Hussein Minawai, Asaima village, and other towns were close to Nyala, the capital of South Darfur. In North Darfur, a peace deal is signed during July after the eruption of violence between the two groups killed hundreds. Later in July, the Mizrahi and the Salamat Arab tribes announced a ceasefire after battles killed over 200 people. The UN Security Council is also announced to review its UN AMID mission. This is the cause of American government needs to be more involved in helping because the Sudanese government needs to be stopped to help the Sudanese people. There are several different explanations for the origin of the present conflict. One explanation involves the land disputes between semi-nomadic livestock herders and those who practice sedentary agriculture. Water access has also been stated to be a major reason for conflict. The Darfur crisis is also related to a second conflict in southern Sudan. Civil war has raged for decades between the Arab-dominated government and the Christian and Amish black Southerners, yet origin is conflict between Islamic Khartoum-based national governments and two rebel groups. Our government needs to step up and help the people of Sudan to protect them from the Sudanese government and from militias like Janjaweed. American people should have more concern for the Sudanese people that are being raped and trying to fight back or try to escape from the militias and the Sudanese government.
I am Lauren Rozeski, and I will be informing you on the latest regarding the LGBT community and equality. The Human Rights Campaign represents a force of more than 1.5 million members and supporters nationwide. As the largest national lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender civil rights organization, HRC envisions an America where LGBT people are ensured of their basic equal rights and can be open, honest, and safe at home, at work, and in the community. The LGBT Equality Caucus formation was announced on June 4, 2008 by openly gay representatives Tammy Baldwin and Barney Frank. The caucus currently has 112 members, 111 Democrats and 1 Republican, in the 113th United States Congress. The caucus is co-chaired by the United States House of Representatives' 7 openly LGBT members. The mission of the caucus is to work for LGBT rights, the repeal of laws discriminatory against LGBT persons, the elimination of hate-motivated violence, and improved health and well-being for all persons, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. The caucus serves as a resource for members of Congress, their staff, and the public on LGBT issues. The LGBT Equality Caucus admits any member who is willing to advance LGBT rights, regardless of their sexual identity or orientation. The NUS report highlighted that there was a climate of fear on UK campuses with a persistent level of homophobia and transphobia. The report states that despite recent progresses towards equal rights, many studies show that homophobia and transphobia are still very much part of our society. It was also found that students who have experienced homophobic or transphobic bullying or harassment are 2 to 3 times more likely to consider dropping out of university. One bisexual student commented on that report. The general attitude on our campus is one that is extremely anti-gay or bi, and I would not feel comfortable coming out to everyone about liking for guys as well as women. Completely believed that it would affect marking of assignments. Not tolerant at all. Jack Salter, UON Students Union. LGBT officer told Impact that the research is unique in its scope and depth, and paints a strong picture of what it's like to be LGBT in education. Phoebes Lau, a conference delegate of UON and next year's LGBT officer, also added that the research supports us to further address these issues of intersectionality, education, and the need for BME involvement in the LGBT community. In addition to, the LGBT community has been faced with workplace discrimination. The workplace is a microcosm of society. As the battle over same-sex marriage rages in the United States, many people may not realize that there is also no consistent federal protection for LGBT individuals in the workplace. In fact, over half of U.S. states have no laws on the books protecting LGBT from discrimination or harassment in the workplace. Illinois has discrimination laws in place protecting workers due to their sexual orientation, but there is no protection for government workers based on gender identity or gender expression. One of the arguments for same-sex marriage is that when allowing LGBT to marry, they then have access to the same benefits as straight couples. They become eligible for survivor and spousal benefits for Social Security and pension benefits, and they can claim spousal benefits for health care. So far, with the addition of Pennsylvania in the past week, 19 states plus the District of Columbia recognize same-sex marriage. Illinois law allowing same-sex marriage takes effect June 1, 2014, with civil unions already recognized via previous state legislation. Because of these issues, not only is same-sex marriage a social concern, but also a labor concern. Several companies have expressed their views against same-sex marriage, the most notable being Chick-fil-A, citing religion as a basis. Other companies, such as Amazon and Microsoft, embrace the issue and support same-sex marriage as an example of doing the right thing. But also lagging is the basic right of individuals to work in an environment free from discrimination and harassment because of their sexual preferences and or gender identity. About 53% of LGBT workers hide their sexual orientation out of fear of losing their jobs. That could all change if current legislation in Congress is passed and signed into law by the President. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act was presented to both houses of Congress in April 2013 and was passed in the U.S. Senate in November 2013 with a bipartisan vote of 64 to 32. The bill would put federal regulations into place to protect the LGBT from discrimination in the workplace. Civil rights laws have been in place for years based on a person's race, their religion, their age, and their disabilities, just to name a few. Now maybe the time has finally come for the LGBT community to be included.